everyone knows about sort of fraud protection, but along with fraud is risk. Everyone's aware of the market crash back in the US in 08, 09. That was a risk management failure. So what are we doing in terms of transparency, and how is digital, and AI getting into sort of the forensics and the predictive modeling that come from looking at a really complex portfolio of investments, right? And so I think all those things are starting to come through in terms of targets for digital transformation.
Welcome to What If, So What, the podcast where we ask what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real in your business. I'm Jim Hertzfeld.
And I'm Kim Chopek.
I'm glad you decided to listen to this episode, because today we're going to do something different. Listener feedback. This is a podcast about you and your business, but this entire episode is dedicated to answering your questions.
Yes, Jim, we asked for your questions and we got some great ones. We're excited to tackle a few of them in today's episode. So let's dive in and give you our thoughts on your thoughts. So Jim, one of the first types of questions we got was around how you stay ahead of emerging digital trends. So what do you think? Can you share some insights on how companies can stay ahead of digital trends?
Well, it's a $1 million question, and we hear this all the time, every day. What's new? What's out there? What have you done? What do I have to worry about? And this is something I think people in technology have been doing from the beginning, right? It's one of those industries where every day there's something new, right? There's a story. There's FOMO, fear of missing out. What's going to overtake me, right? It's just a whole industry that's been just saturated in disruption. Not to overuse that word, but people getting displaced, things getting taken out. So there's a strong motivation to stay ahead. So I love the question. I think it's just part of our jobs in a way.
It's what we do every day, right? I mean, how do we stay on top of things? How do you stay on top of digital trends?
Yeah, I was going to say companies do it, stay ahead because their teams, their employees are doing it, right? So how do we do it individually? I'll share just my personal sources, not the big reveal here, but kind of funny because I find something new literally every day, and that is a newsreader. I love Flipboard. I feel like I've curated it. It knows me.
Yeah.
There are a lot of news feeds out there. If you don't remember Pocket, it was pretty good. These algorithms are really good because unlike other feeds, they're just trying to sell you things. There's a little more organic flow to it. I think Reddit is great. It can be a mess.
It is.
In a lot of ways. And I'll tell you, my obsession that really took off during lockdown is YouTube. And it's amazing. I don't know what motivates people to put certain videos out there, but it is a great source. And honestly, Google's done a pretty good job on the algorithm. It's advertiser driven, but it's pretty good at kind of getting to know you and what your interests are. And so I found in terms of just every day kind of finding something that's going to trigger a thought, those are, you got to have your go-to, feeds and sources. Those are pretty good. I think some of the old school things, user groups, I think are making an odd comeback. I see this in different cities.
Oh, yeah. Everyone wants to be in person again, so they're showing up, and it's great.
Exactly. I was going to make that part of it too. I think conferences are back. And Kim, you were just at Adobe Summit. I was just at NRF. People are hungry and they want to talk and they want to show and tell. So I still think conferences are a great place to go. And everybody knows this. If you go to a big conference, there are going to be two venues, maybe two levels, right? If you've ever been to the Javits Center in New York, you have the expo hall that costs a lot of money, but you got to go to the basement. You got to go to the cheap seats because that's where the hungry up-and-comers are. Like everybody who's been to a conference knows that. So I think, the in-person user groups, conferences, any kind of peer network. I actually think LinkedIn is a pretty good source. There are people excited to share what's going on, so I think that's a lot of passive listening that you just got to curate your own sources.
You do. Yes.
But I think actively, we've talked about this before in other episodes, you got to think about why does an emerging trend or technology matter? And a lot of people get stuck in the, I've got to reinvent my world or I've got to blow something up. We always go back to the innovator's dilemma and recognize that there's a range of innovations, right? And so there are sustainable innovations that are just improving what you do today, and disruptive ones that get all the hype. But you have to think about an innovation in terms of how it's going to be applied. And I just think that's a great approach. And of course, we have an approach called Now, New, Next that we're excited about. It kind of drives that. I'm not going to go into that here, but the active part to me then is experimentation, and you got to be hands-on. We're not going to talk about Chat GPT in this episode because I think there's enough chat about it, but, get out there and figure it out. Find a team, find a couple of hours a week where you or your team can be hands-on. You have to try it. To me, there's no substitute for that firsthand understanding.
I think that's great. Somebody asked me recently how I stay on top of particular trends in commerce. And honestly, at first I was like, I don't know. I just absorb, I guess. I don't know. But then I realized, to your point, no, I've set up, a bunch of different Google alerts. I subscribe to a lot of newsletters for that industry.
Oh
yes,
gosh.
conferences
Newsletters.
for sure. And I ended up sending this person 10 different sources that just over time I've accumulated and realized that I really rely on those outlets to get information. But yes, as an individual, it's one thing. As a company, you have to have a framework around it to try and figure out what matters to the business.
I wanted to mention that too. I mean, there's a famous book years ago called Crossing the Chasm that gets into what's going to make it, what's worthwhile, and you have to be active about that. And you can't take on every emerging trend. Because some of them, there's no application, or some of them just don't cross the chasm, right? They don't make it. There's not enough buy-in, or maybe they were ahead of their time. So I agree, organizations have to have a funnel for emerging technology and innovation. And, it's an active process. So Kim, we should share our favorite links, newsletters in the show notes. Let's go ahead and do that.
Oh, that's a great idea.
All right, Kim, we've got another one. And this is a common question we get. And sometimes it's looking at what goes wrong, but we wanted to really phrase it this way. And I'll let you start, Kim. Can you share examples of successful digital transformations we've seen? And what were the key factors that contributed to their success?
Yes, this is a great question. And yes, we live and breathe digital transformation. We're a digital transformation consultancy. So we've seen the good, bad, ugly. I think as we go through what we've seen to be successful contributors, you can kind of think, well, what's the opposite of that? Yeah. That's where we see things don't work out so well. But the first thing I would say, number one, is leadership buy-in. Without leadership buy-in from the top, it is very difficult to get buy-in across the organization, to have insight into the metrics where you're going to measure the success of the program. Real investment, whether it is a capital expenditure, an operational expenditure, real buy-in from the top. And I think buy-in extends to engagement. Where we've seen the most successful transformations have been when we have the C-suite engaged in steering committee meetings and giving feedback and asking questions, just hands-on. I think another important success factor is realistic goals. A digital transformation is lofty. It's long-term. People can experience fatigue, so it's really important to understand what you're trying to achieve. Is it realistic? Is it practical? Do that due diligence. And obviously that ties into the leadership buy-in. And then communicate that. We've talked so often in our episodes about the importance of the basics like change management and communication and, clear and often engagement with the folks that are actually deploying the transformational activities. But it just bears repeating. Clear communication, often communication, with a very important undertone of the what's in it for me, because that's where you get kind of the top-down, bottom-up buy-in where everybody meets in the middle. Change management has to be a part of that. There has to be, just like there has to be a better word or phrase for digital transformation.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Change management's kind of the same thing. It sounds so maybe
it's a lot of things.
Scary, but all of this is encompassed in change management. And of course, you have to start with the evidence for change. A lot of companies, I think, where we see them say we need to transform digitally. Well, what's the case for change? It's not let's boil the ocean. Let's pick a few use cases that we know need to be addressed and build momentum that way. But what have you seen, Jim? What would you add?
No, I love all of those, Kim. I think the what's in it for me, I hate to be cynical, but, we ask teams and individuals to do a lot. And the way I look at this sometimes, you mentioned the people deploying the digital transformation, and then there's the people that have to live with the digital transformation, right? So I think there's people, okay, we have a bunch of developers and then we've transformed, but you have operationally have to make it work. And so, people's jobs are going to change, and they were hired for one thing and they're being asked to do something else. So and I think that's where really good, strong change management comes into play. But back to the evidence in the case for change, I think those go together. And people, they need to believe that what they're doing is the right thing. It's good for them. It's good for the customer. It's good for the company. It's good for society. And I'm seeing that a lot more lately. And I think just because there are a lot of skeptics out there, they've been through, we're in the, I don't know what generation of digital transformation we're in, fourth, fifth. We've been through this. They've seen it. Some of them burn out. Some of them fade away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now I got a Def Leppard song in my head. So, that evidence is important up front. And then just to keep showing those changes. So I guess the one thing I would add, we throw this phrase around there, we call adoption through execution. And they got to kind of see it, that's the ultimate evidence. You can show a business case, you can show a prototype, you can look at customer research. What I love about incremental lean approaches is you're back to that level of, test and learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And experimentation. Mm-hmm. And I think that the, actions speak louder than words. So we love to see, simple pilots. Maybe we take a product line and we sell it online, or we start with this part of the call center and we deflect that with a self-service, experience. You got to kind of see it. So I think the sooner you can start to show and tell, the more it's going to stick.
That's a great point.
I didn't hear anything about technology in this list, but I think we all agree it doesn't seem to be about the technology. The technology is pretty good. There've been a couple bad implementations, but I think that's generally not what makes it sustainable.
No, the impetus is always the business outcome, business goal. And then along the way, we determine what technology can support that.
Mm-hmm.
Related, I think one of the other common questions we got related to digital transformation was kind of taking it to that next level about how do you see it applying in specific industries. So, Jim, what role do you see digital technology playing in shaping the future of industries like healthcare and finance and other industries that maybe are a little bit behind in digital transformation?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the industry question, Kim, because for two reasons. One is it's really getting into when you're getting into the industry or going through the industry lens, really drilling down into what makes the business unique, in my opinion. I learned this years ago. Take the grocery category. A lot of people think of the grocery category, either their secret sauce is the grocery store, like fresh produce, making it look good and putting it in the right place. And it's just sort of this shopping experience. And it is. But the way that you get fresh produce is from an amazing supply chain and distribution network, right? That's not an accident. So, when you really kind of peel the layer of some of these industries, a lot of grocers think of themselves as supply chain and distribution companies. Nike famously thinks of themselves today, and I think it's true, as a marketing and brand company. They're not a shoe, they design and manufacture shoes, but they're really a brand company first, And so I think when you start to unpack what it means to be in an industry, you're getting to what really makes the business run and getting to the real outcomes. So first of all, I just love I love that lens in the beginning. The other thing I like about industries is we find a lot of our clients, they want to know what their peers are doing, but as soon as they kind of get our sense of that, they want to know what their peers outside of the category are doing. And I think healthcare and financial services are great landing points. I think when it comes to digital, both of those industries are really driven by regulatory and compliance concerns. Like they're two of the most regulated industries on the planet. And so for good reason, right? Safety, keeping things above board, lives are literally on the lines. So I think that's certainly driving a lot. So I think technology is always going to play. The investment is almost always going to be, driving things like price transparency in healthcare, right? There are regulations that are forming. This is a long time coming, by the way, but price transparency is going to be a regulatory concern take payments. And I think it's an ISO standard around payments that are coming out to make them more real time, more auditable, more consistent metadata. These are clear digital or digitization plays, right? That are really tied to really hardcore specific industry issues. We talk about one of the elements of financial services is everyone knows about sort of fraud protection, but along with fraud is risk. Everyone's aware of the market crash back in the US in 08, 09. That was a risk management failure. So what are we doing in terms of transparency, and how is digital, and AI getting into sort of the forensics and the predictive modeling that come from looking at a really complex portfolio of investments, right? And so I think all those things are starting to come through in terms of targets for digital transformation. And I can't forget consumerization. Kim, I know you hear this a lot. Like your background is what a lot of healthcare providers want to hear about. So I think all those things are in the forefront, I think, and there are a lot of, I would say, new use cases. But again, I think the industry lens overall is it's music to my ears when we get to talk about it, because you're kind of digging in, solving these real business problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think?
And I think, we've said it before, but this notion of new behavior drives new technology, drives new behavior, drives new technology. These industries can't ignore that trend anymore.
Yeah.
To your point, we're talking a lot about consumerization in healthcare because the end consumers of whatever services that are being provided are looking across their digital experiences and saying, like, what the heck? Why do I have to fax something in?
Yeah.
Is it, so I think,
this real?
We're seeing that in healthcare. We're seeing it in automotive. There, a lot of industries are finally getting pushed to make these investments because they won't remain viable otherwise.
Oh man, that is the virtuous circle. Flat circle. I hear this term flat circle a lot, right? So you just laid it out: behavior, technology, behavior. The flat circle of digital transformation.
That was Clay Sharkey, but yes, yes, right.
Yeah, we're here. We're here to invent hokey hashtag titles for digital. You're welcome.
Right.
Well, great, Kim. I thought this is a great set of questions, and the first time we've done it, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, we'll make sure to add into our show notes our contact information. If you have any other questions that you'd like us to tackle, please send us a note.
And until then, or next time, please keep asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what?
You've been listening to What If, So What, the digital strategy podcast from Perficient with Jim Hertzfeld and Kim Chopek. We want to thank our Perficient colleagues, JD Norman and Rick Bauer, for our music today. Subscribe to the podcast and don't miss a single episode. You can find this season along with show notes at perficient.com. Thanks for listening.